It's froggy time, y'all. And also the dragon that we've been leading up to for 10 episodes, but it's froggy time. Dungeon Meshi episode 10 was storyboarded and directed by Tomoyuki Munehiro, and it leads right up to the Red Dragon, combining chapters 21, 22, and 23. This is another one that makes some structural changes, some good, some bad, and features some incredible animation and background art. My favorite shot comes right at the end of the episode, and there's a lot to talk about this episode, so let's dive right in. The crew encounter this stairway full of even more tentacles, and the background artist brings some great color, texture, and variety to them, and it's interesting how some of them look like upside-down bamboo shoots. However, the manga panel that this is based on is packed with detail in a way that makes this area feel completely overgrown and overwhelming, like there isn't even any clear spot to step. A sense that's missing in this version, which focuses more on the hanging vines, and is otherwise just a few plants sprouting here and there from the stairs. Let's take a quick look at this cut of a tentacle popping out of the wall to try to eat Marcille while she's not looking, and compare it to this cut from episode 1 of a carnivorous plant jumping out at Marcille and trying to eat her while she's not looking. As I mentioned in the first video in this series, and by the way, if you're just joining us, I have a playlist of all these videos. It's linked in the top right corner, so you can go watch them all. I triple dog dare you, so now you have to do it. This cut, in true Trigger fashion, is all about build up and release, taking 4 frames to wind up, snapping open in just 2 frames, and then taking another 4 frames to ease out. The frame rate is changing constantly through the cut, but the majority of the timing detail is in the build up and ease out, some of which are animated on ones. This show is a new era for the studio though, with more control from younger creatives, and that shows even in smaller moments like this. This feels more like a rubber glove being inflated with air rather than jaws that haven't opened in a long time being forcefully pried apart. It's animated smoothly on 2s as it expands, and the only major jump between frames is right here, after which these last 5 frames are animated on 1s. It makes it feel like rather than starting in slow motion, snapping open, and slowing down again, this tentacle moves more smoothly and is only speeding up as it goes. Whereas this shot is a big spectacle that gives you time to take it all in, this one is less stylized but more startling. It's also cool to notice little details like the framing here, where the placement of the tentacle leads your eye right to Chilchuck's face when we cut to the reverse shot, and Marcille then appears in front and drags your attention over to the other side of the screen. The anime skips over these 2 panels of Laios talking about how pretty he thinks the tentacles are, and how if you could remove the stingers, they would make a great houseplant or a gift for a lady. This background art does some really cool stuff with lighting. The shadows are tinted blue, which normally would be caused by the soft ambient light dispersed from the sky in an outdoor scene, but here it comes from the glow of the water from the previous biome, which you can see being projected through the door. The main light source is of course the magical lantern thingies that Marcille always has following them around. The sharp shadows that are on these tentacles and projected on the ground convey their shape and the light's location. It's just too bad that whoever added Marcille's shadow here didn't get the memo, because this simple circle under her feet doesn't match the direction of the light source or the shape of her body. It's a small light source, so as the light falls off in all directions, everything fades into this darker blue tinted atmosphere with slightly shiny highlights from the light coming from the door. I initially thought that this frog was just doing normal frog stuff, but then I realized that this is Marcille's explosion spell, building pressure inside its mouth before exploding. Very cool. Wait, she named her staff? This cut, probably by key animator Mahmoud Mofta, who posted this illustration on Twitter and whose name looks kinda funny written in katakana as Mahmudo, shows tension in the frog's skin, like Chilchuck is tightly wrapping a bandage around his hand. And I like the subtle detail in the way that tension pulls his pinky inward a bit towards the rest of his fingers. Continuing with the theme of reflections from episode 9, this shot of Chilchuck reflected in the frog's eye, which is also in the manga, is more than just style. It's there to show you that he's in danger. And fittingly, the crew pays extra attention to anatomy with this inner eyelid, which is translucent so you can still see the eye underneath, but it's not as glossy as the surface of the eyeball itself, so the light is diffused and the reflection disappears. They've rearranged this hybrid montage slightly so that the 2 are intercut between each other rather than just being one after another, and added reaction shots of Marcille in between, which build the tension toward her outburst at the end, and also transition between the 2 scenes seamlessly. The choice to have Senshi and Laios each start narrating from off-screen before the camera follows Marcille's gaze over to what they're doing really gives us as the audience a sense that she's being overwhelmed.
If you wore this, Marcille, We think you'd look real cute.
They were right. Where did his eyebrows go? He just had eyebrows a second ago. I love this impressionistic shot where we again get to see the world through Laios' eyes in all its bright, sparkly glory. And this is a cool touch, how Laios bends down to pick up his sword with this sort of awkward bend at the waist, balanced out by his right arm, encumbered by the bulk of the frog suit. Anyone who grew up in a snowy climate knows what it's like. And we're finally here. The 5th level of the dungeon. I love this 7-frame loop by Hiromi Niwa, which goes from 12 frames per second to 8 as Marcel gets more distraught and undercuts the tension of the scene before transitioning to the next one. Namari and the Tansu's party return to the town above, and it turns out that Mr. Tansu is actually a pretty important advisor to the Lord of the Island. There isn't a whole lot in terms of animation to talk about here, but it is cool that we're starting to see the political influences and machinations around the dungeon. There are a lot of people with vested interests in this place as a natural resource for different reasons, and the main characters don't even know yet that they're just a part of the powerful people's master plans. The anime cuts a whole lot out of chapter 22, reducing it to more of an interlude, starting with this moment before the meeting where Mr. Tansu muses about how much fancier the place has gotten since the dungeon appeared, saying that the island is swollen with greed and fit to burst. Though this sentiment is shown through the following conversation, as the island lord seems to be greedy, feckless, and naive. As always, the show characterizes him through his relationship to food, because this insert shot of him delicately draping what looks like some fancy prosciutto over buttered bread is the most detailed animation in this entire scene, and shows you, rather than telling you, that he's become comfortable and complacent with his wealth. Mr. Tansu is just as greedy. The only difference is that he understands that the real value lies in the power that comes from the dungeon's magic, not the money itself. And by the way these two are characterized, it seems like he might actually hold just as much power through his influence as the guy who's technically in charge, a tale as old as time. The bulk of what was cut, though, comes from the latter half of this section with Namari and the twins. I love that the long-lived races consistently have no idea how old tall men and half-foots are. In the anime, it cuts off at the confirmation that Fallen's corpse still hasn't been recovered, so she's still in the dragon's tummy, and mainly serves to show that Namari is worried about them. In the manga, however, the three then go to a tavern and bond a bit while Namari discusses the dangers of acting too casually about resurrection. How a resurrection can go wrong if, for example, a corpse has been possessed, or fail completely if more than 1/13 of the body has been lost or destroyed. I won't go into too much detail about this because talking too much about why this conversation is important could sort of implicitly spoil episode 12 or 13, and because I think there's a possibility that this could still be woven into the middle of one of the next few episodes. In fact, I hope they do that, because while we got a taste of it last episode, this conversation is kinda important, and it also makes it clear why Namari was so upset last episode when Mr. Tansu used her as a human shield. She seems to be speaking from experience. Anyway, the party has arrived at the castle town, and the tone takes a grim turn. The threat of the dragon is finally becoming real. Here's a shot where the anime uses the inherent strengths of moving images to pass time and transition seamlessly from one shot to the next using just camera movement. This is just one large background with two still images of the characters, but it plays on expectations programmed into our brains from live action film and real life. This transition would be possible but difficult to do in live action. You'd need either a computer controlled camera rig that can duplicate this exact motion twice, or some actors who can run really fast. In animation, it's extremely simple, but because it's outside the realm of what's generally plausible in live action, it's a creative transition that not every storyboard artist would have thought to use. Good on you. I love the use of smears in Marcel's arms when Chilchuk says he can help distract the dragon, and the way her arms overshoot their original position one way then the other before finally settling back to the middle, making the motion feel super springy. And there's nothing she loves more than yanking people's heads around with the head of her staff. There are 100 different ways to animate a boiling liquid, and this 4-frame cycle with layout by Shimon Dohi and cleanup by Tomoya Yamaguchi is fast and energetic, showing the heat of the oil, but with relatively small and few bubbles compared to shots of boiling water, because in this scenario most of the bubbles come from the moisture in the food evaporating rather than the liquid itself. The red dragon finally reappears for the first time since the very first scene of the show, and I love the way they choose to build up to this big reveal by panning over the city with the sound of gigantic footsteps, and these 3 shots where the camera peers cautiously through windows and and alleyways, catching only glimpses of one part of the dragon's body. By showing it from a human perspective, Munehiro gives context to the scale of this thing before finally revealing it in all its glory. In episode 1, I said that they've redesigned the dragon a bit from how it looks in the manga, giving it more of the blocky, angular look that Studio Trigger do so well. And it seems like they've gone for a look that's much closer to Ryoko Kui's original design here. Much of the detail is still shown through high contrast light and shadow, and I particularly appreciate the patterns around the edges of the shadows that hint at the texture of the dragon's scales, but there's also much more line detail this time around too. This may not be the flashiest shot in the episode, but it's certainly the most impressive. The way the dragon rotates its head slowly and methodically, animated on twos, shows a confidence that this animator has with these complicated forms, and the consistency in the shapes is remarkable. In some ways, slow movements can be more difficult than fast ones. There's a reason rotating a character is a classic animation exercise. Also check out the way the lighting changes on the horns as they rotate. I imagine shit's about to really pop off next week, so if you want to catch my breakdown of next episode, check out the subscribe button down below. Thanks for watching.